Something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern life, and most men only notice it when it has already taken something from them. It begins as a minor adjustment, a slight bending of the spine, a soft rearrangement of priorities that feels in the moment like maturity. You are not chasing, you are being patient. You are not sacrificing, you are being understanding. You tell yourself that this is what emotionally intelligent men do now. They accommodate, they listen, they soften, they prove they are safe. And then, one day, you catch yourself staring at a screen at 1017 in the morning, reading the same 2 sentences for the 4th time, trying to locate the hidden meaning in a delayed reply. You tell yourself you are calm, but your body is not quiet. Your pulse is slightly elevated, your jaw is tense, your attention is captive. You are waiting on the woman's mood to decide what kind of night you will have. It is rarely dramatic. It is an erosion, not an explosion. You can see it in the micro behaviors. A man who used to move through his day with clean momentum now checks his phone at red lights, at the urinal, in meetings, in the gym between sets. He starts typing long messages, deleting them, rewriting them, trying to land on the perfect combination of confident and gentle. He begins to schedule his life like a servant to an invisible court. If she answers, the evening has meaning. If she does not, the evening collapses into a grey, restless wandering. It is not that he loves her, it is that he has given her the power to regulate him, and if you watch him from the outside, there is a subtle tragedy to it. His shoulders are no longer fully back. His laughter has a slight strain, as if he were performing normalcy. He speaks about not needing anyone, but he is negotiating his self-respect in private, in silence, in the small hours. He is becoming emotionally detached in the way modern men often praise, not because he is sovereign, but because he is exhausted. This is the dangerous freedom of emotional detachment, the kind that appears to be strength, but is actually surrender, the kind that protects you from pain by amputating your capacity for truth. The kind that makes you unbothered while your life quietly becomes smaller. And long before we had podcasts about attachment styles, long before we had dating apps, long before we had the soft language of boundaries turned into a consumer product, one man already saw this pattern with terrifying clarity: Diogenes. Not the polite Diogenes you see quoted on a classroom wall, not the domesticated philosopher, the real one, the man who lived in a barrel, who mocked the powerful, who held a lantern in daylight, looking for an honest human being. He did not preach detachment as a form of numbness. He exposed detachment as a weapon and warned what happens when men mistake numbness for freedom. By the end of this, you will understand precisely why emotional detachment has become so seductive to men and what it quietly destroys in you if you use it as a hiding place instead of a discipline. Diogenes lived in a world that understood hierarchy without pretending it did not. Athens was not a therapy room, it was a theater of status, influence, seduction, and survival. Men measured one another in reputation, wealth, physical courage, rhetorical skill, and lineage. There were public assemblies, public shaming, and public honor. A man's social position was not a private feeling, it was a real currency. And Diogenes walked into that city like a contamination. He rejected the economy of approval. He denied the rituals that made men obedient. He rejected the quiet agreements that turn human beings into domesticated animals. While others polished their image, he stripped life down to what cannot be taken: character, discipline, and the refusal to live as a slave to appetite, whether that appetite was for food, sex, comfort, praise, or the warm illusion of being chosen. That is what made him so dangerous. He was not merely detached, he was immune to the leverage that society uses to control men. And here is the brutal thesis that will carry everything you are about to hear: the spine beneath the story, the mechanism beneath the psychology, the architecture beneath the emotions. A man who uses emotional detachment to avoid truth becomes a slave to whatever he refuses to feel. Read that again internally, because it is the kind of sentence that exposes years of self-deception. Emotional detachment can be sovereignty, or it can be cowardice dressed as philosophy. It can be the clean withdrawal of a man who sees through manipulation, or it can be the dissociation of a man who has been domesticated by fear and wants to call it peace. Diogenes would have despised the modern man's relationship with emotional detachment, because most men do not detach from illusions out of discipline, they detach from reality out of injury. They do not become free, they become anesthetized. Diogenes' framework was simple, and that simplicity is why it still cuts through everything. He believed virtue is the only real wealth. He thought most social customs were a theater designed to keep you obedient. He felt desire makes you purchasable when you need something: attention, validation, a woman's approval, a group's applause. You have a price. You can be bought, pressured, seduced, shamed, or herded. That is why, when Alexander the Great, history's most famous conqueror, approached Diogenes and offered to grant him any wish, Diogenes allegedly answered with a sentence that contains more masculine doctrine than 1,000 modern lectures: "Stand out of my sunlight." Not "I am honored," not "thank you," not "let me show you my worth." Just "you are blocking what I already have." In modern male-female dynamics, the sunlight is your attention, your time, your nervous system, your mission. And most men have handed that sunlight to women as if it were a donation to a temple. Then they wonder why they feel hollow. Then they decide the solution is detachment, coldness, distant silence, emotional unavailability. But Diogenes would ask, are you detached because you are free or because you are afraid? Because there are two kinds of detachment. One is the detachment of a man who has excavated himself from illusion. The other is the detachment of a man who has been wounded and decides never to feel fully again. The first is sovereignty. The second is a slow suicide. Consider modern scenarios that demonstrate this thesis through mechanical reliability. A man begins dating a woman and he tells himself he will take it slow. He does not express desire clearly. He does not lead decisively. He holds back not from wisdom, but from fear of rejection. He becomes performatively chill. He thinks he is demonstrating strength, but he is actually communicating that he is not anchored. He is waiting for the environment to tell him who to be. Or another man in a relationship feels disrespected. The disrespect is not always loud. It is often subtle. It is the casual correction in front of others, the disregard for his schedule. The way his boundaries are tested is like a child pressing their fingers against an electric fence. He feels it, he knows it, but he tells himself he is above drama. He detaches instead of confronting. He becomes quieter, colder, and more distant. He believes he is preserving dignity, but he is actually teaching her that his dignity is negotiable. Underneath, his resentment grows like mold in a dark room, or the man who has been repeatedly hurt decides that his solution is to feel nothing. He becomes a dating technician, optimized photos, optimized messages, calibrated indifference. He is not sovereign. He is strategic, as traumatized people become strategic. He tells himself that this is the game. But Diogenes would call it slavery by another name, still living in reaction to others, still governed by what you fear losing. Diogenes was famous for mocking those who were controlled by convention. He is said to have walked with a lantern in broad daylight, claiming he was looking for an honest man. Whether literal or legend, the symbolism is precise. Honesty is rare because men live in performance. They say what gets them accepted. They do what keeps them safe. They become emotionally detached, not to become truthful, but to become untouchable. But being untouchable is not the same as being strong. And now we go deeper into the psychological mechanism, the slow, step-by-step collapse where a man loses himself while insisting he is fine. It begins with numbness that feels like control, what the man thinks is happening. I am protecting my peace. I am not over-investing. I am not letting women manipulate me. I am focusing on myself. What is really happening underneath, in Diogenes' worldview, the man has not mastered desire. He has merely suppressed it. He has not become free. He has built a wall around his own nervous system because he does not trust himself to stand in the open. Numbness is seductive because it imitates power. You stop reacting. You stop hoping. You stop being disappointed. You stop being needy. And for a while, your life feels quieter. But here's the hidden price. When you numb your sensitivity, you also numb your perception. The same nerve that feels pain also detects disrespect. The same capacity that longs also recognizes what is meaningful. When you anesthetize yourself, you become easier to lead not by others, but by your own lowest impulses. Because when a man refuses to feel, he begins to chase stimulation instead of meaning. He scrolls longer, he consumes more, he flirts with more women, but connects with none. He works without purpose, trains without spirit, sleeps without rest. He thinks he has escaped attachment, but he has merely traded attachment to a woman for attachment to distraction. Then comes the second movement, justification and self-negotiation. What the man thinks is happening, it is complicated. Timing is off. She is stressed. I should be patient. I do not want to be controlling. I do not want to be that insecure man. What is really happening underneath? He is bargaining with reality to avoid the risk of asserting himself. He is attempting to purchase certainty with self-erasure. You see it in the text threads. He sends a clear message. She responds coldly or not at all. Instead of accepting the information, he tries to rewrite the universe with another message. He clarifies, he softens, he jokes, he apologizes for nothing. He offers another time, another option, another version of himself. And each time he does this, he teaches his own psyche a brutal lesson. My desire is not essential. My boundaries are flexible. My dignity is conditional. Men do not understand how quickly self-respect is trained into or out of a nervous system. It is not built on grand declarations. It is built on small decisions repeated until they become identity. I work with men who can run companies, manage teams, and endure physical hardship. Men whose external lives look competent. And yet, in intimacy, they become like water. They take the shape of whoever is in front of them. They begin to speak in the language of apology. They begin to anticipate rejection and preemptively surrender. I once spoke to a man mid-30s, disciplined, fit, respected in his field, who described his relationship in a single sentence that still haunts me. I feel like I have to earn the right to be myself. That is not a relationship, that is a psychological tax. And he did what many men do. He responded with detachment. He went quiet. He withdrew. He stopped expressing needs. He told himself that if he became less available, she would value him more. On the surface, this resembles a masculine frame, but underneath, it was still bargaining. It was still a strategy to control her perception, not a commitment to his own truth. Detachment, used as manipulation, is still dependence. Then comes the third movement, self-abandonment and loss of respect. This is where the man begins to kneel emotionally, without realizing it. It is not always begging. Often, it is over-explaining. It is the compulsion to present evidence of your goodness, your intentions, your innocence. It is the frantic desire to be understood by someone who is not trying to understand you. He changes his schedule around her. He cancels training. He delays sleep. He checks her social media and tries to interpret her stories like sacred scripture. He becomes hyper-attuned to micro-shifts in tone. He apologizes for her moods. He offers reassurance when she has offered nothing. He begins to fear conflict, not because he is peaceful, but because he is afraid she will leave and he has no internal structure without her. Diogenes would call this slavery, not metaphorical slavery, actual slavery, a man governed by external approval. And here is the cruel paradox. The more a man abandons himself to keep a woman, the less of a man there is left for her to respect. Not because women are cruel, but because respect is a response to structure. Respect is a response to a man whose spine is not for sale. There is a contrast I have witnessed again and again, and it confuses men because it seems unfair. A man will say, I treated her well, I was loyal, I was present, I was patient, I did everything. And then he watches her pursue another man who, on the surface, does less. But the difference is not effort. The difference is economics. The man she later pursued looked similar on the surface. Also busy, also confident, also masculine, but his time was not offered as a plea. His attention was not leaked. His emotions were not used as currency. He did not detach to punish. He detached because he was not dependent. And when he spoke with finality, not negotiation. That is Diogenes' world. The man who needs less is harder to control. The man who needs less is harder to buy. The man who needs less can tell the truth. Now we widen the lens because the man's collapse is no longer purely personal. The environment has been engineered to exploit precisely this weakness. Dating apps do not sell you love. They sell you the illusion of infinite options while quietly converting your attention into profit. Social media does not reward stability, it rewards performance. Public discourse does not protect masculine initiative, it often punishes it with suspicion, mockery, or legal risk. The attention economy has turned male desire into a predictable extraction. Keep him slightly hungry, slightly uncertain, somewhat ashamed, and he will keep paying, if not with money, then with time, energy, dignity. And the modern man feels this. He feels the HR risk of misinterpretation. He feels the cultural instability of roles that used to be clearer. He fears being labeled, clipped, and exposed. He feels the legal architecture that can turn a divorce into a slow financial bleeding and a custody battle into an emotional amputation. He feels the fragility of reputation in a world where a single accusation can spread faster than the truth. So he adapts. But many men adapt by disappearing. They call it detachment. They call it not playing games. They call it focusing on myself. Sometimes it is wise. Often it is fear. Diogenes would recognize this culture immediately because he lived in a different version of the same machine, a society where people traded authenticity for acceptance, where men wore masks to survive socially, and where status was a god. His answer was not bitter. His answer was austerity, psychological and material. Reduce what you need, and you'll see the system lose its leverage. If you can be content with less, you cannot be easily bribed. If you can endure discomfort, you cannot be easily threatened. If you can stand on your own, you cannot be easily herded. And this is where the phrase dangerous freedom becomes literal. Emotional detachment is dangerous because it can become a counterfeit form of Diogenes' austerity. A man can reduce need or he can reduce feeling. One makes him sovereign, the other makes him dead inside. The culture pushes men toward the second. It makes them believe that the safest man is the least emotionally alive. That the masculine ideal is the man who is unreactive, uninvested, unbothered. But there is a difference between being unbothered because nothing controls you and being unbothered because nothing matters to you anymore. One is freedom, the other is despair, wearing a clean shirt. The consequences of staying blind are not limited to dating. A man who trains himself to detach from his own emotional truth becomes unable to build anything that requires devotion. He becomes mechanically productive, but spiritually absent. He starts projects and abandons them. He cycles through women, feeling nothing. He becomes suspicious of intimacy. He begins to interpret every request as manipulation, every emotion as a trap, and eventually, he becomes the very thing he feared, not a man protected from pain, but a man incapable of meaning. Here are the lines men need to hear, because they cut through the fog and can serve as a mirror when you start drifting. If you call it detachment when you are really avoiding truth, you are not becoming free. You are becoming controllable. If your peace depends on her mood, you do not have peace. You have a hostage situation. When you stop telling the truth to keep someone, you do not keep them. You lose yourself, and she only meets what remains. And perhaps the most Diogenian line of all, stripped of romance and sentimentality, the man who cannot endure discomfort will always be owned by whatever promises relief. Now we move into practical integration, not as a list of tips or cheap optimization, but as sovereignty in action. Notice the invisible pattern of emotional kneeling. Most men do it through language. They soften statements into questions. They turn boundaries into negotiations. They say, "I just feel like maybe we could," when they mean this is not acceptable. They explain their standards like defendants in court. A sovereign man does not over-explain. He does not perform righteousness. He states reality. He allows her to react while he remains anchored, not because he is cold, but because he is not pleading. Diogenes did not persuade the powerful to respect him by begging. He lived as if their respect was not the currency that fed him. Notice the pattern of mission abandonment. Most men will rearrange their schedule around a woman early, before she has earned access. They do it because they are intoxicated by desire and terrified of losing opportunity. They cancel the gym. They delay work. They show her, unconsciously, that she is now the central pillar of their week. A sovereign man does the opposite. He protects his time as if it were a scarce resource. He invites a woman into a life that already has architecture. He does not ask her to be his purpose. He allows her to be his companion. The moment a woman becomes your mission, she becomes your judge, and you become a man auditioning for your own life. Notice the pattern of performative detachment. Most men, after being hurt, decide to become emotionally unavailable as a strategy. They think distance is power. Sometimes distance is wisdom, but only when it is grounded in self-respect. If you detach to punish, you are still dependent. If you detach to provoke pursuit, you are still negotiating. If you detach because you cannot face your own fear of being seen, you are not strong, you are armored. A sovereign man can be warm without being needy. He can be open without being exposed. He can express desire without surrendering his spine. Diogenes would not have praised the man who feels nothing. He would have praised the man who feels entirely and is not governed by it. Notice the pattern of comfort addiction. The modern world offers endless sedation, pornography, scrolling, endless entertainment, endless novelty. Men who claim they are detached often become quietly addicted to these anesthetics. They have removed the pain of rejection by eliminating the risk of real intimacy. But the cost is that their nervous system loses strength, their focus decays, their standards erode, their sexuality becomes less a fire and more a compulsion. A sovereign man disciplines appetite, not because appetite is evil, but because appetite without mastery is a leash. Diogenes chose simplicity not as an aesthetic, but as a strategy, reduce the points where life can capture you. Notice the pattern of outsourcing identity. Most men let women, friends, culture, and algorithms tell them what they are. They become whatever gets them rewarded. They become agreeable. They become safe. They become a product. The sovereign man decides who he is in private, then expresses it in public. He does not ask permission to have a spine. He does not require applause to be certain. He is not cruel. He is clear. Clarity is what most men fear, because clarity creates loss. And loss is the price of self-respect. Diogenes was willing to pay that price. Now, you stand at the threshold of two futures, and this is not poetic exaggeration, it is literal architecture. Your next decade will be built from what you do with this. If you ignore this, you will become more detached, but not freer. You will refine your avoidance into a lifestyle. You will call it peace while your nervous system quietly decays. You will accumulate experiences without meaning. You will grow suspicious of women, not because women harmed you, but because you never learned to stand in your own truth, and therefore every interaction will feel like a threat. You will be older, more tired, more cynical. You will tell yourself you are wise, but you will be unable to love without fear, unable to lead without resentment, unable to build without distraction. You will live as a man who has learned how to survive emotionally, but not how to live. And if you answer this, you will become quieter, and people will misinterpret it. You will lose some connections because you will stop performing. You will disappoint some women because you will no longer bargain with your standards. You will feel lonelier at first because you will no longer anesthetize discomfort with attention and novelty. But you will begin to build an internal citadel, something real. You will have fewer relationships, but clearer ones. You will have fewer conversations, but more honest ones. You will have a mission that does not require anyone's permission, and that mission will become the center that stabilizes everything else. You will not need to be emotionally detached, because you will not be emotionally dependent. And here is the final warning, spoken in the simplest language possible, without romance, without ideology, without hatred. Emotional detachment is either discipline or decay. If you use it to see clearly, it will free you. If you use it to avoid truth, it will hollow you out. Women do not destroy your life. They reveal the structure you have or the structure you lack. They are mirrors, not monsters. If you're repeatedly losing yourself, the problem is not that women have power. The problem is that you keep handing them the keys to your nervous system. Diogenes did not need to hate the world to refuse to be owned by it. He did not need to blame anyone to become sovereign. He reduced what he needed until nothing could buy him. If this struck something in you that you have been trying to ignore, keep this work alive. Share it with a man who is quietly disappearing inside himself. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of clarity, because men do not drift into strength. They are initiated into it. And remember the line Diogenes lived by, even if the world never forgives you for it. If someone is blocking your sunlight, you do not negotiate your worth. You tell the truth and you move. A man is not free when he feels nothing. He is free when nothing outside him can purchase his soul.